Hey there, and welcome to another Spooky Reads. And tonight we're going to talk about H.P. Lovecraft. So, H.P. Lovecraft, Call of Cthulhu. He wrote this in 1928, or at least that's when it was published, was 1928 in a magazine called Weird Tales. And it's a great story. But H.P. Lovecraft himself has become a little problematic. And actually, he was probably a little problematic even in his own time. If you haven't heard about it, it basically comes down to racism. Some of the attitudes he portrays about black people in particular are, rough, I guess would be the way to put it. And it's one of those cases of like, well, do you throw out the baby with the bathwater? Because yes, horribly racist, but there's so much so good in a horror sense in his writing that you can't really discount it. In fact, he's really the father of a whole area, so a whole subgenre of horror called cosmic horror. And the basic idea of something so horrible that your very sanity is at risk by interacting with it. And a lot of writers have continued to play in what they call Lovecraftian horror, where you take some of the good and leave out the bad. And I've enjoyed a lot of work in that area. I read Lovecraft Country. I'm currently watching the TV show and liking it quite a bit too. But I read Lovecraft Country a couple of years ago, and it seems especially right to use Lovecraftian mythos to talk about race in Jim Crow law era and that kind of thing. So it was a really nice way of doing alternate history and intermixing. And in a similar vein, I really also enjoyed Cherie Priest. They're called the Borden Dispatches. There are two books, Maplecroft and Chapelwood, and the Borden in the Borden Dispatches is Lizzie Borden. So in a similar vein of alternate history, intermixing Lovecraftian mythos to give a Lovecraftian twist to actual events is really pretty cool. And I loved both of those. I also really like to study in Emerald by Neil Gaiman. That one is Lovecraftian / Sherlock Holmes. And I've been hearing a lot about Ballad of Black Tom, but I haven't read that one yet. If you've read it, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. So Lovecraftian is definitely still a thing. It's a thing that I like to write in sometimes, and lots of other writers do. So let's get a little taste of it here. So this is, I pulled two little excerpts from the Call of Cthulhu, and I'll just read and we'll see where we go from there. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all of its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up a terrifying vista of reality and our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. Theosophists have guessed at the awesome grandeur of the cosmic cycle wherein our world and human race form transient incidents. They have hinted at strange survivals in terms that would freeze the blood if not masked by bland optimism. But it is not from them that there came the single glimpse of forbidden eons which chills me when I think of it and maddens me when I dream of it. That glimpse, like all dread glimpses of truth, flashed out from an accidental piecing together of separated things, in this case an old newspaper item and the notes of a dead professor. I hope that no one else will accomplish this piecing out. Certainly, if I live, I shall never knowingly supply a link in so hideous a chain. I think that the professor, too, intended to keep silent regarding the part he knew, and that he would have destroyed his notes had not sudden death seized him. So I love this setup. You get a kind of the Lovecraftian philosophy here, and that whole idea of the danger to your sanity, and how you can catch a glimpse and be okay, but if you ever piece it all together, that's all she wrote. And that's kind of, this frame is the frame for the whole story, is the idea that our narrator found out what happened secondhand through notes and journals and other people's recountings, and he's pulling it together for himself. And I love the part where he says he would never knowingly pass it on to other people, when of course that's exactly what the story is doing. That's fun. So the other excerpt that I chose here is a moment of facing the thing, you know, the really scary thing. And I really love the descriptions in this and the kind of horror imagery that we get. The aperture was black with a darkness almost material. That tenebrousness was indeed a positive quality, for it obscured such parts of the inner walls as ought to have been revealed, and actually burst forth like smoke from its eon-long imprisonment, visibly darkening the sun as it slunk away into the shrunken and gibbous sky on flapping membranous wings. The odor rising from the newly opened depths was intolerable, and at length the quick-eared Hawkins thought he heard a nasty slopping sound down there. Everyone listened, and everyone was listening still when it lumbered slobberingly into sight and gropingly squeezed its gelatinous green immensity through the black doorway into the tainted outside air of that poisoned city of madness. Poor Johansen's handwriting almost gave out when he wrote of this. Of the 6 men who never reached the ship, he thinks 2 perished of pure fright in that accursed instant. The thing cannot be described. There is no such language for such abysms of shrieking and immemorial lunacy, such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. A mountain walked or stumbled. God! What wonder that across the earth a great architect went mad, and poor Wilcox raved with fever in that telepathic instant. The thing of the idols, the green sticky spawn of the stars, had awaked to claim his own. The stars were right again, and what an age-old cult had failed to do by design, a band of innocent sailors had done by accident. After vigintillions of years, great Cthulhu was loose again, and ravening for delight. So there's more I could go on, but I think that's enough to give you the sense. I love the overly verbose, academic-y kind of way he talks with words like tenebrousness and these adjectives, slobberingly and gropingly, immemorial lunacy. You could take almost any one of these and it could be a great title for a horror story of itself. So there's a little bit of Lovecraft for you. I'm not sure I recommend actually reading too much Lovecraft because, like I said, the racism is hard to stomach, and even the style of the writing is an acquired taste. It's not for everybody. But Lovecraftian horror, as crafted by other people, I do highly recommend. And I've written a little bit of it myself. My friend Dave is much more of a Lovecraft fan than I am, and he did a couple of anthologies. And this one, Dead Man Humor, Fears of a Clown. This was the call for this one was to write stories about what frightens clowns, and my story in this one took a little bit of a Lovecraftian turn. And that was the first time, I think, that I'd written a Lovecraftian story. And then later, he did a call for Outsiders Within, this one specifically for cosmic horror. And my story in this one is called Margaret Lets Herself Go. I was going for something that felt a little A Rose for Emily, where you can interpret events in different ways until you get to the end and you find out what really happened. And that definitely took a cosmic horror, is it madness or is it truth kind of moment too. And those are, I don't know, I just love those when it comes to horror. So I hope you'll check out my books. I hope you'll check out Lovecraft. And thank you for joining me for this series. I'm having such a good time talking about all the books that I love.